Join spiritual feminist and empowerment coach Joni Advent Maher for Trust Your Sacred Feminine Flow. Listen in for intimate conversations about money, transformation, and feminine sovereignty. And now, your host, Joni Advent Maher.
Welcome to Trust Your Sacred Feminine Flow. I'm your host, Joni Advent Maher. I'm a spiritual midwife and a transformational guide, and I am so delighted to welcome Marcy Brenner to the podcast today. Welcome, Marcy.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Joni.
Oh, my honor and pleasure. So let me tell our listeners a little bit more about the wonder that is Marcy. Marcy Brenner is a baker's daughter. She's a musician, a writer, and an advanced breast cancer survivor. And she lives on a remote island of Ocracoke off the coast of North Carolina with her husband, Lou Castro. And together they are the duo Coyote, and their magical venue, Coyote Music Den, is a site of live concerts, Marcy's writing studio, and Lou's lesson studio. It's quite a life you have created for yourself, Marcy.
I like the way that you said that because it has been very intentional.
Yeah, you have quite a story and quite a journey that we were talking about a little bit before we started recording. But I just want to ask you, where would you like to dive in? What feels important for you to name in terms of how you created this life that you have today?
Well, I think that it all started, from the cancer diagnosis. One of the worst things is one of the best things. It's just gave me so many backhanded gifts, and it gave me the gift of a question. The question was, am I living the life I want to live? Now, you might need a little backstory to understand the impact of the fact that there was an answer, that there was a no in there anywhere was a big surprise, because my life from the outside looked perfect, looked amazing. But it really, in ways that were very important and maybe very quiet, I had some work to do. And the cancer was just a gift for me to wake up call to life, if you will. And I began to answer that question of where was my life not working? And the biggest one was my marriage. And I have come to find out that through support groups and through my advocacy work that happens to a lot of women. And men, stereotypically, want to fix things, and I love them for it, but there are some things that aren't fixable. And I just needed my husband to be my hero, and he was not up to the task, and I had to leave him. I had to leave my life. I was 3,000 miles away in California, and I left my life and went back to my home turf, because that's where I needed to be. My life was threatened. I needed help. And I think that's the thing that I'd like to touch on the most is the gift of that question, for sure, but also community and other women, other people. The need to ask for help was very hard. And my husband's family, it was a famous rich family, and they just didn't, let me just speak with my husband. I don't know about the whole rest of the family, but for him, I don't think he felt like he needed other people. And the thing is we need each other in this life.
Yeah.
So that, I think, is one of the most important things, is the understanding of community, connection, relationships with people, to have a community to be able to ask for help, and then to be able to help others.
Yes, I certainly have, just through my own challenges of living and hardships that have come up over time. It really is the thing that binds us to each other. It is through our pain that we are able to connect in ways and open to each other in ways that when everything's going great, we don't necessarily need to do with such depth
Hmm.
and tenderness.
It's true, and it's in that place of community and togetherness where one of the most important things in life, also to me, and I think to all of us, is where story happens.
Mm,
And I just feel like, what else is there but story? Everything else is hearsay.
mm, mm.
So we have to, be able to be brave enough to tell our stories, and equally brave enough to hear others' stories, to listen.
Yes, to be witnessed and to also be affected by other people's stories. And I will say that my first experience of you was as a musician and listening to your songs, not all of which, not all the music you were performing were your songs, but a number of them were. And I was so touched by the power of your storytelling through music.
Thank you. That's one of my favorite forms of storytelling. I have also been cultivating my ability to stand in front of people and tell the story that comes in that moment, which is a very sacred practice for me as well. Um, Sitting still, was a real gift of being ill, because I had no choice but to learn how to sit still. And a lot of things caught up to me that I needed to work on in
Mm.
that stillness.
Mm. Well, I'm struck by, because this is what you said 20 years ago now that the first diagnosis.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. The diagnosis and surgery, I had my left breast removed, and I went through chemotherapy. And that moment when the bandages came off, I really just didn't know how that was going to be. I was only 34 years old. Um, you know, uh, Gosh, my breasts were my friends, but one of them, sort of turned against me, and I had to let it go to save the rest of me. But I didn't know how that was going to feel. And I had my sister on one side and my then husband on the other. And the bandages came off, and it was beautiful. It was okay, and I had done a lot of work to have that be okay. And so then I realized, okay, that's what I'm going to do with my life, is I'm going to help other people realize that it's okay.
Mm.
So it was really that day. It was that moment. I'll never forget it.
Mm. And that is part of what you do now. Yes, you do
That's
advocacy work and outreach work.
I do. I do. And I do a lot of speaking. People have me come and speak to different groups, from scientists to physicians, where I'm sort of the layperson, the blood and guts of it, to support groups and women's groups and annual conferences, hospitals, things like that.
Mm.
One-on-one, a lot of one-on-one.
Mm-hmm. So, how has your experience of the feminine, I would say, I guess the question is, how have you experienced that presence in, whether it's this story or the story of your life? How has she been showing up in your world?
I call her the Great Mother, and it's very important to get in touch with that. I have to say, the older I got in my life, the more I realized that was important. My friendships with women now are just so deep and sacred to me. I think intuition and trust have come from that awakening. to the feminine, to the sacred feminine, the sitting still, the compassion for other people, the connection.
Mm-hmm.
I have found that most people are willing to play, and they're willing to just dive in if you're willing to go first,
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of why I wrote that song Dead Girl Walking. Is I really just wanted to say what it was like to walk around with an advanced breast cancer reality.
Mm-hmm.
And the music was really happy, and the words, Dead Girl Walking sounds kind of scary and dark, but it's really positive. And it really comes down to what I realized after the song was done, and I began to share it with other people, that we're all dead girls walking, and so, and that we just need each other.
Yes, yes. So I'm going to suggest that we pause for a moment and we actually play that song, because it is such a powerful song and has so much to say to all of us.
Dead girl walking on a lonesome road, headed to the chair. Dread comes knocking, racking my brain for one good prayer. Dead girl walking, drop down in a basement nightmare. Ivies and TV squawking, balding heads fight despair. Tragedy happens every day. This fear I carry has many names. Dead girl walking, please loan me strength I can't repay. I beg you, keep talking. The shadow never quite goes away. Dead girl walking, red needle stitching my well-laid plans. Uncertainty is stalking, my future's held in hungry hands. Tragedy happens every day. This fear I carry has many names. I'm still walking, I have survived. I am a woman who's finally alive. Dead girl walking, dead girl walking.
Well, that is potent medicine, as I like to say.
It's about being alive for me, to live while you're alive became my motto, if you will.
Mm. Yes, and I had mentioned to you earlier that idea that you mention of tragedy happens every day, and this fear I carry has many names. That really touched me in my own journey. That idea that there are so many painful things happening every day in our lives or in the lives of women or men or children that we love, people that we love. and it's how we meet that and what we do with that.
And I think I also really mean to also convey there that tragedy is ordinary. My tragedy is just mine. It's nothing extraordinary. It's part of the soup that we're all in, and so tragedy won't end. And the next beautiful thing and the next tough thing is coming down the road, and it's that it's ordinary. It sounds funny to me to say it that way, but it's part of our lives. And so I just had to find a way to juggle that, and a place to not just shove it away on a shelf, but actually play with it some and see what was in there.
Yeah, so I guess I'm curious about your experience as an artist, as a songwriter, and does it allow you to transmute? Or you said you needed a place to put that, or somewhere to hold that. So can you just talk a little bit about your songwriting or about your creating of story and how that works for you?
Yeah, sure. Like I said, story to me is everything is story. And I love to hear other people's stories. And I read a lot of autobiographies and documentary films. And I just learn so much when I hear how somebody negotiated their life and what they learned and the choices that they made. I'd like to write a story about, all the choices that I didn't make and what would have those ended up being like, My husband's first love passed away last week, young.
Wow.
And I said, Lou, if you had married, you would have just lost your wife. And it just kind of blew our minds to imagine all the different choices in life that led us to where we are, and how perfect they all are. And I think that's part of the feminine flow is in my life is to sit still and to recognize that I'm insanely positive, Joni. So really everything's sort of good, Where's the good in it? Yeah, I'm always looking for the good in it. Comedians look for the funny in it, and I look for the lesson in it and the good in it. And the songs for me are like little babies, and they demand to be written. I write pages and pages and pages of the story before I find out what story it is that wants to be told, and then there it is. And the music usually happens someplace in there. And Lou and I have an interesting collaborative process that involves a lot of trust and safety with each other and validation. We validate each other's ideas and inspire each other. So, and that's what happens with other women and other artists who are connected to their creative flow.
Mm. So I have a really big smile on my face because I'm just imagining you because I've attended your concerts, and I just wish that I could give everyone just a little like glimmer video snapshot of you performing and expressing, and because you just transmit so powerfully both that positivity that you mentioned and it's like the essence of transformation. It's like from the tragedy to the transformation. And it's just one of the things that I tremendously admire about you, and that you always leave. I always leave feeling lighter.
That's nice.
Yes, and that is one of the gifts that you bring. Is that lightness of being, and of that, like helping us remember collectively, like let there be light. That there is some lightness, regardless of what tragedy might be occurring in our life today.
We always have a choice. Happiness is a choice.
Yes.
And I wrote a song called Sleeping with Lucky, and it was really an exploration of luck. And luck is a choice. You can choose to, I'm a lucky girl. I'm really lucky. Or or you can go to the other place, which is I'm really unlucky. And it's important to allow that in too. I'm not some, crazy person that's always delighted with life. But gosh, I have a choice. So why not, be grateful, that I had my dad for 88 years. He had to leave, but how great that I had him. So I think that's what I've come to, is just to find the good in things and focus on that. Those 2 hours of a concert are sacred, because not only do you, Joni, and the audience get to, if you will, get away from your troubles, so to speak, but we do too. We get to go down in there and connect with you and with that oneness as well. Because story is oneness. We all have the same stories. My songwriting mentor, Nick Venet, used to say, write a love song. And I'd say, Nick, there's 1,000 love songs that have been written. And he said, not yours, not the one you're going to write. And I realized that it's true about our stories. People say, oh, I don't have a story, but you do. Everybody does. And they're sacred and precious, and they're like little babies. And I had crippling stage fright.
Really? Never would have guessed.
Really? Yeah, I'm just a goofball, but and I'm just brave with it. But up until the year 2000, when I met Lou, he said, come on, let's go out and share this music, that we're writing and that we've discovered together. And I was so nervous. I mean, I just had crippling stage fright my whole life. Every time I had to perform in any recitals or anything, it was just awful. And the way I conquered that was to realize that it wasn't about me at all. In fact, it was sort of arrogant of me to be nervous and stuff, because it wasn't about me. And I let go of my selfness in it. Do I have lipstick on my teeth? Do I, just stuff, all that mindy stuff, that monkey mind that happens, I just realized it wasn't about me at all. And in fact, I had to get out of the way.
Yes.
And I did.
Yes. Yes. Well, and
I'm so nervous to play that Dead Girl Walking song, because I thought, who am I to make people go on this journey from A to B? Yes, I deliver you safely at the end of that song, but how do I have the right as an artist to ask somebody to go there? And I would just not really have an answer to that question. And I would just sense on a given night, I'd think, oh, I think I need to sing that song. And Joni, every single time I would sing that song, there would be a little bald-headed lady that would come up to me, or a group of them that would come up and say, oh, you said for us what we want to say. You did it for us. And I would just be grateful.
Wow. Yes. And that to me is the beauty and the gift of the feminine, both your being willing to listen and to trust, to trust that knowing, like today's the day I need to sing the song. And yeah, just the willingness to surrender to that. And I was struck when you were sharing about the concert and how both the getting out of yourself, it really feels like a sacred communion event, that it is like communion, like we are all, music is a conduit to something greater and something deeper, something bigger, whatever superlative you want to use. Yeah. So
it's so true. It's so true. And then the amazing thing is that I have this little tiny kernel part of it, but then it opens up and the universe takes over, and it's universal, and the song gets to be whatever every person needs it to be. And that's when I feel like I've done my job.
Yes, yes. And your willingness to say yes, to be the conduit.
To have lipstick on your teeth in front of a bunch of people. Or toilet paper on your shoe.
Right. But
it's a leap of faith.
Yes, it is. It is. And to realize time and again that you either fly or you're gently caught when you take those leaps of faith.
Yeah, and it's not about perfection either, you know? It's not about the clean closets. That's what that line is about, you know? My producer asked me once, he said, listen, you can have some great songs, you can have some clean closets, decide, but you can't always do both. And I realized that clean closets were not the most important thing.
Thank goodness for that.
I agree. Because our whole life could be about cleaning closets if we allowed it to be.
Yes,
But
yes.
closets are dark and lonely and filled with dust bunnies, and they're not very rich, you know.
No. No, they're not. So I am feeling guided just to ask you about something about the partnership and the way you've created your work in the world um, and actually money and kind of that place of trust and creation and supporting yourself through being an artist and an advocate. What
Mm.
what might you say about that?
As you started, the word money came to my mind. I wrote it down, and yeah, that's a fun one, isn't it? Very, very fraught with prickly details. But well, money's been an interesting thing for me because I was married into that rich, famous family, and so that was a very interesting exercise, Joni. And I'm writing a memoir that includes part of it includes that experience.
Wow.
Which pretty much comes down to you can never have enough of what you really don't want.
Wow.
Because the thing is,
wow.
you know, it's so cliche, but what you want is love, you know, and no amount of money you can't buy a loving.
No.
And so that I realized that through that wonderful experience. It was a wonderful experience. I loved my family then. You know, I loved it. I loved my husband. I still do. I mean, I love those people. But people aren't always good for you. So it was kind of like being captured by wolves for a little while there. So it took a bit of bravery to say no to that. And I drove down that big fancy driveway in California and left it all behind me because it wasn't mine and I didn't need it or want it. I took what was mine and went back home and got rid of cancer. Is what my first job was. And then became that artist. And, you know, I remember sitting I'm a baker's daughter, so I watched my dad bake a loaf of bread at a time and a dozen cookies at a time. And he put us through college and we had a home and I never wanted for food. He was the love of my life. He was just the most loving, kind person ever. Mm-hmm. And so that was a bit of a lesson to see how small activities repeated daily for 75 years can make a living. So I had this lemonade stand when I was 8 years old. I was 8 years old, and I still remember this moment. And I was sitting out there, and I said, you know, I like business. I like all that stuff. I went to college. I got a business degree. I have part of my brain does that, and I like it. And I remember sitting there going, I was a musician already. Back then, I was a musician from the minute I can remember being alive till when I could reach those piano keys. And I remember thinking, you know, I'll do this business thing so that I know that I can eat and everything. But when I'm 30, which felt like 100 years, I want to be an artist. And it happened. It's not in the way that I could have ever imagined. But it happened, and so I had this little chunk of time where I didn't have to think about money, and I sort of found myself in a place there that then when I popped out of it, I dove into that artist self of mine, and I decided to be brave enough to be an artist and worry about money second, and it hasn't been easy. You know, it's an exercise every day in having faith in the universe that it's going to support my work, and it has.
Yes.
I mean, it really has.
Yes.
You know, I mean, I just, you know, I vowed I would go anywhere and do anything to help people through the basement, of a cancer diagnosis. So I've, driven hundreds, thousands of miles, for a love offering, um, and I don't know, I just have always trusted that the money would follow.
Mm-hmm.
So far, it
Yes.
has.
Yes. Well, when we are doing our right work, our sacred work in the world, I know that we are supported in that, that the universe does support us in that. And sometimes it is a matter of how do I get out of the way to allow the generosity to pour forth to support me. But I think you are a living testament to that, because you have a generosity of spirit, and it's like life cannot help but bring that back to you.
That's what I'm banking on. No, I'm just kidding. But it's really something about that. It seemed like what I learned about that too was that, like, the more stuff you have, the more physical things you have, the more you have to maintain those things. So I've learned, especially in the last 10 years of austerity that we all have learned, is what I really can live without. And a lot of that, what I thought was abundance, was really just kind of noise and just a bunch of stuff to keep track of and pay taxes on and insurance and wash it and paint it and maintain. There's a lot of work in things. And I'm hoping, it seems like people are, I don't know. I guess I just hope that other people realize that, again, you can't have enough of what you really don't want.
Yes.
We're such a consumptive culture, and it's a distraction, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yes. And I'm having an image, because you live on an island and you live in an area where hurricanes are frequent, or some regularity. I know that you have lived through some experiences of storm or hurricane, and I don't know why that's coming to me, but I know there are times when the water levels have been pretty high, and I'm assuming that affects those things or those possessions, or that maybe you've lost some things even that way.
True. Very true. But the wonderful thing I lost living in a place with such a dynamic reality like that is I've lost the illusion that I have any control over anything except my attitude. See how insanely positive I can be? I'm telling you, there's nothing you can do. And so the smallest examples of that are, I have a dentist appointment in the town that I have to take a ferry to get to. Well, the ferry's not running, so I don't have my dentist appointment, so I reschedule.
Yes.
It's okay.
Yes. Okay. There are no big deals.
Well, really, it's almost true.
Almost.
Sure feel like big deals, though. I'm just very compassionate to the fact that, life is very heavy for so many. It's so hard. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
It is.
But in that difficulty, I can always see it. I'm closing my eyes right now, and I'm seeing this light that peaks around the edge, not unlike the eclipse that we experienced. Yes, where there's that little bit of light that comes through the edges of the moon where the craters are. And during the times of darkness, that's what it's like. I've never said this before. I've never thought it before, but it's so true. It's so true.
You're absolutely right. And I had the image. I had the image myself just as you were about to say it.
Powerful.
Yes.
Love it.
Woo!
I know. Don't you love it?
Yes. And this is how we do it. This is how we birth the new life, the new reality, is just by the coming together and the tuning in and the naming and the receiving.
Yes, and the not knowing, being comfortable with not knowing is great. You can dive into something and not know. I think that's kind of what life is.
Yes, it makes me think about any stories of sacred feminine flow, because those really are stories of that always start out with not knowing something.
Right, right. Gosh. Were you asking a question? Yeah.
Yes. Do you have a story of trusting? And I know you've shared many already, but is there one that comes to mind when you think about really trusting your sacred feminine flow?
Yes. Well, there are many. I really feel lucky to have found the ability to take that leap. And one of those leaps was a speaking engagement. And they asked me to come up to Northern Virginia to a very scientific event and be in her shoes was my workshop, and walking in her shoes. And so I was there to be the blood and guts and the living person inside of the reality of what we're now studying as genetic ways to deal with disease. So I was around all these genetic scientists and counselors, and it was quite something, very, very brainy. So I realized I needed to bring the other side of myself there. And every single experience that led up to this moment was guided in this way. And I had to keep leaping and keep trusting all day long. And the first one was, I said, Lou, I don't know why I said yes to this, except that I say that I will go anywhere and do anything. And I'm going anywhere and I'm doing anything. And I need to get to Maryland and get back that night. And he said, I'll drive. He said, I'll drive you.
Wow.
You can prepare, you can rest. I'll drive you. While you do it, I'll sleep, and then I'll drive us home. And that's what proceeded to happen. And it was the most spirit-guided, flow-guided experience ever. And it answered a myriad of questions, and it helped other people. And the words that came out, I don't even know what they were, but I had to tell a different story. And I had to tell a very, very deep story from my life about genetics and how they worked in my life with my mom and myself and my daughter. And out it came, and it was just an amazing experience. It still kind of boggles my mind to this day. But I had a circle of about 50 people, and I was supposed to do one thing, and a little voice in my left ear said, you have to tell a different story, and I did. And I didn't die. And nobody shot me, and it turned out to be the very best thing ever.
Yes, just the right thing that was needed. And I'm so struck by your loving and supportive partner to drive you, because that's not a short drive.
No, it was about 8 or 9 hours each way.
Yeah. So you are blessed in good partnership. That's for sure.
I am, and that's something we also cultivate and work hard to have, because you just can't go unconscious.
No, you can't. And keeping things clean, so to speak, or dealing with those pieces that come up that need tending is so important.
And I think a lot of people think, especially women, I imagine from my own experiences, just that we want to have some kind of balance. We feel like we're supposed to have balance, and at best, you might find balance a little bit in any given day. But I think the biggest mystery and the biggest gift is to find peace in imbalance and just juggle it and wrestle with it. And work with it. But the to-do list will never end, and the balance will never stay. And staying nimble and light on your feet, is really important. And to be able to say yes to the most surprising things that you'll hear.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And
To say yes,
yeah, it makes me think of riding a wave.
Oh,
Which,
yeah, great metaphor.
yes, which makes me think of Ocracoke, where you live, which is my happy place. Yes, thank you for sharing it with us tourists.
Well, we get that the gift of that uncertainty with the weather and the fairies and all the things that affect our lives so deeply that we have no control over.
Mm.
So, it's pretty obvious here that we get to do that.
Yes, yes, that right. Most of us are a bit removed, probably much more than you are there. And it's one of the reasons I love it, because I can go to the point, which is the tip of the island, and every year it looks different, and just seeing the way that it shifts and changes, and it's a real mirror for life.
Yeah, it really does. And it's still itself, and it's still beautiful, and it's still accessible. It just has morphed a little bit. Every day here changes like that.
Mm. Mm. So we are nearly at the end of our time, but I do want to ask you, as I always do, if you could share some wisdom from where you stand today with your younger self, whatever that means, whether it was yesterday or 50 years ago or 20 years ago, what would you want to tell her?
Well, that's such a tender thing. I have a picture of myself that I keep in my writing space. And it's a picture of myself from my kindergarten class.
Hmm.
And that picture was the last picture taken of me before the magic went away. And went away it's only temporary, but that was when the time in my life where I was on that cusp from being, in child life magic to realizing that there was a world and it had impacts, and reality began to understand a little bit more about the world. And so it seemed like the magic sort of went away. But that picture I keep right in front of me to remember to be kind to her. That, don't self-edit and critique and judge and use loud words, all caps, if you will. And I remember her to be kind to myself when I'm working, not be self-critical. But mostly she reminds me about waiting, about trust, about breath, and embracing life and kindness to myself. And she's very important to that. And so she's telling me all the time, be patient with yourself, wait, be patient with the waiting, remember to breathe, be kind to yourself.
Yeah, so that in that innocence and that purity, there is deep wisdom.
Yeah, we come in with it and we go out with it. Sometimes I wish we could not have to recreate the wheel every life. That we could, let's start from someplace further along the line. But it's the living that gets us there. So you have to do it.
Yes, that's what we're here for.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're here for.
And that little girl learned to tell people that she loves them, because she learned then at probably that moment that you might not see them again. So say what's so right now. Don't wait. Some things require waiting and some things you shouldn't wait.
Yes. That is a beautiful note for us to wrap up on. Thank you for your
Thanks, Joni.
Yes, thanks for your generosity and your lightness of being and your wisdom, your great wisdom.
Thank you for your heart and wanting to go to the heart of it.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Matters.
So you have 2 websites that our listeners can access you through. One is your music, your wonderful music with Lou at coyotemusic.net. And then your advocacy work for cancer survivors you do through deadgirlwalking.net. Yes?
Yes.
And anything else listeners need to know if they wanted to reach you or see more of your story? Or
I'll go anywhere and I'll do anything to help people through the basement of a cancer diagnosis. I really will. And I have. And I'm all over videos. If people want to see my goofy self making music, they can.
Post stage fright. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yes. Never would have guessed that. All right. So I also want to thank you, beautiful listener, for spending some time with us today. And as always, to remind you, until next time, to always trust what your heart knows.
Thanks for listening to Trust Your Sacred Feminine Flow with Joni Advent Maher. If you like what you heard, the best compliment you can give us is to share our podcast with a friend and subscribe, rate, and review our podcast at iTunes.